Good afternoon, good evening, Bill. Lovely to be with you again. And fellow listeners, welcome back to episode 16 of The Power of You.
Always a pleasure.
Always, always. We're a change of scenery on this end this month. So, I was just explaining to Bill before I got on. We've gone from the sunshine of Portugal to the cozy, cold Scotland vibes. So, in front of a fire this evening. Yes, together through all seasons and all weathers. But anyway, as always, I have a topic for us this evening that I'm keen to get into, and it is this topic of kind of low frequency emotions. And I wanted to bring this up this evening, Bill, because I think this is something that I know I've experienced, and I'm sure other people everywhere have experienced low frequency emotions. And when I say that, what do I mean? I mean emotions of kind of fear, envy, jealousy, shame, guilt, these emotions that we often make our lives so much more difficult by kind of feeling these emotions and then sitting and wallowing in them and then not actually using them as an indicator to inquire as to what this emotion is actually trying to teach us. So I wanted to go a little bit tonight into these different low frequency emotions, and I guess where they come from before we kind of speak to the audience about how we can kind of transmute these low frequency emotions and hopefully turn them into positive high frequency emotions like love, joy, happiness. Yeah, I'll over to you, Bill. What's your thoughts to open up today on low frequency emotions?
Well, I think you put your finger on it, is that they're like an alarm going off, like an alarm clock. You know, alarm clock makes a very dissonant, loud noise that we don't like, and that forces us to wake up even though we don't want to and turn it off as quickly as possible. Now, if we could only do that with these low frequency, as you call them, emotions,
Mhm.
I always call them negative emotions, same thing. Um, that would be very useful because they are trying to tell us something. Something's out of whack, or from our perspective, things are out of whack. They may not actually be out of whack, but if they get us to pay attention to them, we may then find out, oh, it's actually nothing wrong. I'm just excited. I thought I was afraid, but actually, it isn't fear. I just can't wait to start, and I'm not even nervous. I'm just excited. That doesn't always happen. But my point is, when we get any kind of feeling that we don't like, that we wish we didn't have, it's a positive sign that there's something we can work on creatively. So we should, if we can, I can now because it's years of practice, and maybe at first somebody can't just say, okay, let's put the emotion aside for a second and figure out why it's there, what it's trying to tell me, and then I can try to figure out what I can do about it. Like if there's something really out of whack that needs my action to take, I can figure out what action I can take. So you might not be able to totally make the emotion subside, but you can at least put it to the side while you try to do these other things with it, transmuting it into situation analysis, diagnosis, prescription, and action.
Mhm. Yeah, I think it's really that's really pragmatic and steps that people can easily take, and when they feel these emotions. I think we're obviously talking about this from like a level-headed, rational point of view, right? So obviously, in hindsight, it's very easy to do, right? When you're talking about it. But I know in the moment, because I've done this myself, it's not always so easy when you can get into these spirals. I talk about how micro habits compound. It's the same with these low frequency emotions, right? Because you can feel fear, and then before you know it, that you're self-deprecating, you're talking down to yourself. You are then kind of get into these cycles of shame, of guilt, and they can spiral, right? So I know when we're talking about it, yes, it's very easy to say, just stop it, inquire, and then and then like learn from it. And but in the moment, I know it doesn't always feel so easy. And this is where I, invite not just myself, but anybody listening. It's not about being perfect. It's more so recognizing the patterns, because even if you don't realize it in the moment, I think if people can start by identifying the trigger point, because these emotions can very easily spiral, and before you know it, you're just in this like kind of head, like mind mess, I like to call it, and you don't know what you're feeling about everything. So I think, how can we, for somebody perhaps listening that just feels like everything is going wrong, and it's just, they're kind of talking down to themselves, and they've got a lot of either what you would call negative emotions, or I would call low frequency emotions. How can they stop the spiral?
Well, there's a couple of different ways. One is if you trust the universe, that makes it much easier. Now, most people listening may say, "Well, I don't trust the universe. So what's your next idea?" But for those few people who do understand what I mean by that and actually do want to trust the universe, do actually understand that it's a living thing, that in fact it's us. We're a part of it. It's all one consciousness. Um, once once you remind yourself that the universe is me, I am it, it's on my side. So if I'm feeling bad right now, I'm kind of self-imposing that. And I shouldn't think that the universe is mad at me. Um, it's benevolent. It's on my side. So trusting that, I can at least breathe more deeply. The thing about emotions, psychology defines emotions and feelings. Feelings are the qualia in the mind, and they're very complicated. They may have images and all kinds of stuff. Emotions correspond to those feelings, and they're in the body. So their heart rate and the rate of breathing, blood pressure, all kinds of hormones, um, neurotransmitters, all of that stuff is going on when we feel emotions. And that stuff is largely controllable by deep breathing.
Mm.
So that's another trick along with trusting the universe. Now, uh, the other thing is to remind oneself that those negative feelings aren't going to get you out of the cause that's causing them. So you do want to get to the cause. So even if you're going to be bleeding and suffering and making yourself feel horrible while doing that horrible thing to yourself, do work towards figuring out the cause and what you can do to eliminate the source of the bad feeling. Even if you have to do it while still feeling bad. If you insist on feeling bad, not trusting the universe, not doing deep breathing. Okay, do that, but at least try to figure out what the cause is, and how do you stem it at the source.
Mhm. Yeah, and that's it. You don't always need to be happy about it when you're doing it, but I guess I guess the alternative is what you stay negative or in these low frequency emotions forever, right? So I like what you said there. It's like you don't need to like it, but you still need to do it, right? And I think that's it. I think it takes a bit of time to like master that art of self-reflection. And I know we've talked about this a number of times in terms of building habits, but I think that art of self-reflection is really, really important. And I know for me now, I kind of look back on earlier portions of my life and I'm like, oh my God, if only I knew then what I know now, right? Because it's we can project a lot of our feelings too. It's like, oh well, this happened to make me feel this way. And once you kind of understand that nobody can make you feel anything, right? Like you're responding to things outside of yourself, but that is an indication as to where, if you imagine that you're standing in a bubble, it's an indication to where there's perhaps like holes in this bubble. Because if you're allowing things outside of yourself to impact the way you feel or react, if something outside of you can do that, then you're outsourcing your power. So what I imagine is that I'm in a bubble, and when I feel any pang of any of these low frequency emotions, immediately I know, okay, there's a hole in my bubble, right? So it's pretty immediate to be able to return it to myself. And I think that is what speeds up your growth, because when you realize that it's not anything outside of you, it's you, then you can quickly do that work to patch the hole on the bubble. But I think what people can spend a lot of time doing is trying to use their energy to fix things outside their bubble rather than fixing their own bubble first, which is what causes a lot of like energy depletion, feeling drained, demotivated, and sometimes helpless and hopeless, because we're spending a lot of time trying to change things outside of ourselves. So I think returning the focus to yourself, while not always easy at the beginning, that is the habit that will, one, help you transmute these low frequency emotions, but also, yeah, transmute them, but then also grow and develop at such a rate that yeah, it will accelerate your personal growth if you're able to do that.
Yeah, I love that metaphor, the bubble with the holes. Love that. The Stoics, thousands of years ago, were talking about control the things that are under your control. And it's really the same idea, but the metaphor of the bubble makes it so accessible to people who are torturing themselves. I think this is going to be a very valuable chunk of our work, is what you just did. And I'm glad you brought up the subject of people who have given up all hope, because I was going to go there next, because it does, people do get into that apathy, hopelessness, helplessness, and they talk themselves into the fact that they're helpless and change is impossible. And then they just want to stay in bed all day, and they're just miserable, and they're doing it to themselves. Now, it's based on a whole bunch of things that happened in their life that they just don't want to put away and say, okay, it happened. It's history. It's in the Akashic record. It's, you know, maybe someday when I'm dead and my eyes are open to a greater reality, I can look back at my Akashic record and see that those moments, which I remember as being humiliating, mortifying, I'll never forgive myself for those. And I'm still punishing myself to this day, and I'll punish myself till I die. And maybe as long as possible after that, weren't so bad, really. That we may have thought we were mortified, but we actually held our head high in the situation as perceived by everyone else in the situation.
Mhm, mhm,
We didn't fight the bully because he was 4 times our size. That wasn't mortifying. It was smart.
mhm, mhm,
So there's this accumulated self-hate
mhm,
that we won't forgive ourselves for. But we can. We can actually forgive ourselves.
mhm, mhm.
and go on from here. Let's start the life anew now.
Mhm. And I think you've hit the nail on the head there because we're our own worst critics and we hold on to our mistakes, our regrets, our learnings. I call them, we talked about this last time, but low cost learnings. You know, we hold on to those and not only do we hold on to them, we hit ourselves over the head with them again and again and again. And we would never do that to anybody else, but somehow we seem to be okay doing that to ourselves. And this is often not even conscious, right? This is often subconscious that we're doing this to ourselves. But this is where it can materialize into this feeling of stuckness too, because actually we're not moving forward, we're not transmuting that low frequency emotion, which keeps us in this stuck feeling, right? You've got the holes in the bubble. If you're not plastering over them, how can you move forward and float upwards if the holes aren't covered? So we keep ourselves stuck because we do, and I would say that this is pretty universal. It's this feeling of, yeah, it's self-deprecation, and we are our own worst critics. I really, maybe there's somebody out there that isn't like that, but again, that's our subconscious inner voice, and it's not always the kindest. And I think what we've talked about this before, but like it's about training that voice. You can either, it's going to be there regardless, right? So you can either be your biggest supporter or your biggest critic. And I think just like anything, it takes work for that to become a supportive ally rather than a foe that is trying to pull you down. But I would just be, I would just invite people listening that if you do feel like you've been in this stuck in these negative emotions for a long time, it that there's probably something there where you are not letting go and you are not allowing yourself to move forward. And I think the reframe from mistakes or regrets is actually you've learned a lesson. And if you can like look back on a previous experience, as you've said, at the end of your days, you're going to look back, and if you can look back on a previous experience and see it differently, that actually means you've grown. If you still couldn't see the error of your ways, okay, then you've not learned. So actually the invitation really is, if you're still stuck in that and you can't forgive yourself for it, the very fact that you're looking back on that with a new perspective and a different lens means that you've grown. So if you've grown, should that issue or challenge arise again, you would react differently.
That's totally aligned with everything I have experienced in my life. And I've found that in order to get my total mind body to go along with these better ways of doing things, it helps to have metaphors that you can visualize, like your bubble. So um, one of the things, this first one here is kind of related to your bubble idea, which is uh, the the body instinctively gets it when you say you don't want to be jerked around by somebody else who's pushing your buttons. You don't want to be a marionette, a puppet for who somebody else knows how to manipulate. And so if other people are making you feel bad, you have to realize that you're letting that happen and you have to cut that off. What you said before about outsourcing your power. The other metaphor is related to that, and that is not only don't you want to be manipulated by outside forces, there's also kind of an enemy within. Remember, this is a metaphor. I'm not saying that this is actually what's going on. It's only a metaphor, but it's a useful one, a kind of a useful fiction, let's call it. And that is imagine for a moment that when you're born, what you are at that moment in time, the stuff that's in your brain and all the neurons and the rest of your body and everything that's your physical body, that is the real you. Now imagine that from that point on, you have experiences. You learn from your experiences from your environment. You interact with the environment, you learn things, that you assimilate things. Now, sometimes experiences aren't assimilated. Then they start to clog up your brain. Meanwhile, your brain has this plasticity, neuroplasticity, which goes on all of your life, especially until the age of 25, but even after that. But it's extremely neuroplastic up until the age of 25. And the brain is always building from the protein that you eat new neurons and connections in the brain. And all that other stuff that's being built since you were born isn't necessarily part of the real you. It's a it's a superstructure being built on the real you. So some of that stuff that isn't really the real you and maybe not even aligned with what's in the real you, I call the ego. That's my definition of what the ego is this false self that's being built on top of the real self. And the false self has a tendency to overreact, either to over promote oneself, which is really a kind of a defensive way of compensating for a feeling of inferiority, or punishing oneself. And, you know, when we're first experiencing these things, we weigh about 40 pounds. We have, no real ability to defend ourselves against these giants all around us. We are at their mercy. Um, if we happen to have abusive parents or one abusive parent, this is going to cause great damage. And the superstructure of ego in the mind is going to definitely take over and obliterate the real me that's being buried under all of these other uh, connections that are being made. And it's all from unassimilated experience. Once we go back and assimilate the learnings, we grow from that. And then it's all part of the real me again. It gets integrated in the real me. The non-integrated part of all that neuronal mess is working against us. Now, Freud split what I call the ego into two parts. One part he called the ego, the other part he called the superego. And what I call the real self, he called the id. Now, he associated the id with all kinds of animal motivations. I associate the id with the universe's intention, our dharma, our purpose, our mission, our uniqueness, our gifts. But anyway, I don't always have to agree with Freud. Most of the time I do. But the superego is definitely the conscience, mean, beating ourselves up all the time part.
Mhm, mhm,
Now, knowing that there's the superego and the ego, and that neither one of them are necessarily us, when we have these bad feelings, we can say, wait a second, we don't want to be manipulated by an enemy within or an enemy outside. We just want to be manipulated by ourselves.
mhm, mhm,
We want to retain all power to ourselves, the real self, the me that was born.
mhm,
So it's another metaphor that may help people to stand up to the inner brutes that are beating them up.
mhm. Yeah, and as you describe that there, I'm seeing, and it's funny because there's building work going on outside here right at the moment, and I'm almost seeing like a house with the scaffolding around it. So when the true essence of us, the authentic us, is that house, right? But there's all this scaffolding kind of around us, right? and we operate a lot of our life from the scaffolding rather than from the house. And this is the process, and I know we use words that are maybe spiritually aligned. So when we say transmute, like transmute these negative emotions or low frequency emotions, what we're actually talking about is taking down the scaffolding. That's what we're talking about when we say transmute. So just to help clarify for anybody listening. So and that process of transmuting, like if we don't do that, the scaffolding will stay. Like we can say that we've attended to it, but if we haven't transmuted that emotion, if we've just kind of put it in a corner, guess what? That scaffold will still be there. So the process of really reflecting and understanding, okay, well, what was that trigger and what was it telling me about myself, right? In order to get rid of that superstructure, as you like, you really have to understand its a root. What is the root of that? Say it's around worthiness, or say it's around maybe you don't feel worthy unless you've achieved X, Y, or Z, or maybe you're punishing yourself and you feel shame and guilt about a mistake that you've made in the past. Until you understand the true root of that, you will not be able to kind of let that go and transmute it and get it out of your system, because it will continue to stay there. That superstructure, that the house next door didn't go up like overnight, right? And it doesn't always come down quickly. But this process of, again, returning the focus to you, stop outsourcing your power to anything outside of you. If you feel something, it's not the other person, it's not the other person or an environment or a situation. It's trying to teach you something. And I'm not saying that every environment is great or every person is a great person. I'm not saying that, but it's there to teach you something. And you said before, if the environment is bad, you can't necessarily change everything outside of you, but you can change the environments that you put yourself in. So you do have control of that. So I think that's the thing. Again, so many people can spend so much time and energy trying to change things outside of us. And actually, all we need to change, or not even change, is the process of unlearning things. The only work we need to do is actually on ourselves. And when we know that, that actually takes a huge weight off too.
Yeah, deconditioning. The U.S. Army, when they first came across my book, Mind Magic, and contacted me and had me speak at West Point and all of that stuff, that the way they described mind magic was all about deconditioning. And of course, you can see that in the book. You can see, this is, the result of what society did to you. This is the result of, your having internalized everything that you got from your parents unselectively, including their biases and their own hang-ups that they had been given by their parents, going back to their parents and their parents. Uh, and so this readjustment to the reality enables you to remove all these albatrosses around you, and all of a sudden you feel lighter, enlightened. You may not be in some people's definition of the term enlightened means you kind of merged with God already, but I'm just using it in the sense of taking off, one layer of albatross at least. You're lighter,
Mm-hmm.
and you can experience more levity. You can laugh. Laughing, in fact, helps.
Mm-hmm.
Like when you're really down. Um, what's that line in the song? Oh, it's My Way, popularized by Frank Sinatra,
Mm-hmm.
written by Paul Anka. Um, something about as the tears subside, I find it also amusing.
And I think that's it. That's that process, right? Of going from these low frequency emotions into these higher frequency emotions, which is love, laughter, joy, happiness. Like, and it is it, you even just the words themselves, like saying the word joy makes you feel joyous. It's a lighter frequency, it's a lighter emotion, right? And I think what came up there as well. I think, and it's something for us all to be aware of, really. We carry so much from childhood, from our experiences, our schooling, our education, all this stuff. We carry so much of that through life. And again, maybe today people are a lot more aware about their mental health and talk more than perhaps was done in the past. It's not so taboo, but I think understanding that everybody does their best from the state of consciousness that they're in. So your parents did their best, their parents did their best. And I feel like what's slowly happening in society is we are becoming more aware and we are becoming more introspective and switched on to our own power. And if you can do this work for yourself, I talk about being like a cycle breaker, right? If you can transmute, I mean, nobody's ever done, and that's part of the joy of life, right? But if you can transmute as many of these low frequency emotions or patch as many holes as possible, you then break the cycle in terms of next generations, because you're then not passing down that same muddy cup. You're passing down much clearer and cleaner water, essentially. So it's knowing that, okay, everything that happened and the person that you've become is not necessarily your fault, but it's still your responsibility, and nobody is going to take that structure down for you or paper those cracks or plaster the holes. It's your responsibility, and we can either, again, be like, oh God, yes, it's exhausting, right? Oh my God, it's exhausting constantly trying to improve and grow and develop. But again, we can either do that and wallow in it, or we can acknowledge that and just move forward. I don't see what other options there are. We're here anyway.
Well, we might as well enjoy ourselves. We can choose joy. We can choose power. We can choose to be on our own side. We can lay down the law and say, look, I'm not going to make myself miserable anymore. If other things make me miserable, I may have no control over that. But I'm not going to make myself miserable anymore.
Mhm.
I'm going to start afresh. Forget all that old baggage there. The myth of Orpheus. Orpheus was a great hero, a great musician. The music that he played could get wild animals to not hurt you.
Mhm.
They just loved the music so much they would become gentle. Uh, and then he lost his wife, but he followed her fearlessly into the underworld, into death itself, and rescued her. But the deal that he had made with God was he wasn't going to look back. That he was warned that if he looked back, his wife would go back to be dead again, and that would be the end of that. And somehow he couldn't resist looking back and lost his wife again. The big lesson there that they were trying to teach us in that myth was we can't wallow in the past. It'll consume us. The past happened.
Mhm.
We can go back and study it and analyze it and try to make rules for ourselves to do better in the future. Next time X happens, do Y instead of Z.
Mhm.
And okay, that's a good intention. We can be resolute. That's useful. But just looking back and wallowing in it without doing anything to transmute it is dangerous.
Yeah, that reminds me of a line in a coaching session somebody said to me, and it stuck in my mind, right? And it says, he said, dwindle, don't dwell, right? So when you look back on the past, allow yourself to go there for learning, but don't dwell on it. And it stuck with me when he said that, dwindle, don't dwell. And I think that that might be useful for anybody listening. And it's a good reminder for me too. And again, none of us are perfect. We're talking about these topics because it's something that we learn and are continuing to learn every single day. And we want to share, I guess, our techniques or the way or our perspective and the way we view the world, and hopefully this will, resonate for others too. And I think, before we kind of close the cycle completely on this conversation, I think we should maybe go into these high frequency emotions, or as you may call them, like positive emotions, and talk a little bit more around those, because we focused a bit on the negative emotions and what they're trying to teach us. But I think it's important to kind of touch upon those feelings when we're in those high frequency emotions, how not only does our mood change and those that are around us, they are uplifted too, but also our whole reality as a whole, when we're in those frequencies, the reality that we experience is completely different than those when those low frequency emotions are running through us. It's also, as you've said, being the creator, the star player, we're the movie director, the actor, and we're everything all in one. So it's not just how we feel that changes when we're in these high frequency emotions, but also a complete, like, a whole reality. So maybe, Bill, you want to go into a little bit more around these high frequency emotions and the power of being in those states, such as joy and happiness, and love.
So wherever you are, um, at the next opportunity, go outside into nature. Be alone in nature. Cold outside right now, so bundle up, and wear a hat and a scarf and gloves so you can be comfortable out there. And if it's really windy and so on, bring the scarf up over your cheeks, um, and breathe deeply and just hang out in nature. Now, choose joy. Consciously choose joy. You're in nature, nothing around you is threatening. It might be beautiful. Take it in, see it as if for the first time. Appreciate the fact that you're alive. What if you had never been born? What would your choice be? Be born, not born? Of course, it would be born. So be thankful that you were. Now you've got all of this life ahead of you. You can do anything you want with it. It's under your control. It need not have anything to do with your past life. You got all these creative choices. So feel the joy, feel the control, feel the freedom that you've got, feel the power that you've got. And now imagine the rest of your life from this moment on, the way you'd like it to play out. And you'll hear a little superego voice in your mind saying, ah, you're going to be heartbroken. Don't get your hopes up. That's never going to happen. Forget about it. It doesn't happen. It's not reality. That's not realistic. Forget all those voices. Let them dwindle. Dwindle them as they occur. They'll occur, dwindle them, and keep focused on, hey, I just want to daydream about my objective. I don't have to reach it, and you don't want to become attached to reaching it. There's no reason to become attached to that. Just say, wouldn't that be nice if? And then imagine that. And whenever you have an opportunity, again, bathroom, shower, moments before sleep, waking up, pre-dream that same, or let it evolve. Maybe that picture of the rest of your life will evolve. Maybe you'll see, oh, I left out this detail. I always wanted to have horses. Now, why did I leave that out? Oh, no, let's bring the horses into the picture. Whatever it is, just keep seeing the possibilities for the rest of your life and don't negate them.
Mhm. I think that goes into the power really of visualization, and like you say, call it daydreaming, call it manifesting, call it whatever you want to call it. But I think it's this process of allowing yourself to see possibilities. And I think allowing yourself to dream. And so many of us don't do that because, but again, this shows us where there's holes in our bubble. And I talk about this a lot. Right, dreaming is one of the activities where you will notice if you literally are not allowing yourself to dream, you'll notice because there's all this stuff stopping you from dreaming. It's a bit like when I play with my 7-year-old niece and I'm at the playground. I love playing with her and it's like so exciting and it's you're using your imagination, right? And but I can also see through the vehicle of play where people are blocking themselves. So again, that is, dreaming, playing, even performing. Those actually are vehicles in which we can see where there's holes in our bubble per se. So if like you struggle with the dreaming element, that also suggests that there is holes there that you need to paper over or do the work to fix, because that the process of dreaming or play or performance, like just for the joy of it, that's actually goes into what we talked about last time, which is this magnetism, right? Because when you're in that state, I notice in the playground when I'm with Jessica, we're having such a fun time, then the other kids want to come over and then the parents want to come over, and before you know it, you've got like you've kind of raised the frequency of everybody around because you are in this state of, play, like creativity, imagination, dreaming. You're in these states. And I think, I see people, there's this guy in particular I see a lot on social media that goes around and asks people what their dreams are. And I think so many people struggle with that because of the limitations, the scaffolding, right? The scaffolding is there and it's not allowing you to dream. So I love I love your kind of advice to get outside, and even if you can't take yourself to dream now, if you can't get yourself to the dream-like state for now, can you start doing the work to pull down that scaffolding that will and eventually allow you to dream? Because that process of dreaming or visualization is so powerful and exciting, and I found that if you can't believe it in your head, if you can't dream it, how can you be it or become it? So you need to first understand like who you want to be, or allow yourself to just, again, not get attached, but allow yourself to play out a story in your head and allow your brain to go there. And even if it feels really uncomfortable at the beginning, and even if you can feel yourself going, well, that's not realistic, that's never going to happen, like hear that voice, but just like hear it, it's noise, right? But continue to really try and focus, and just, it's an exercise. It can, you'll probably feel silly at first, but allow yourself, put yourself in that uncomfortable position. And actually, when you allow yourself to do that, you'll start to hear all the scaffolding that is is around you, or the holes there. And even that's a clue. So dreaming will actually give you clues about the emotions that you need to transmute.
Absolutely. And if you're out in nature and you've managed to start yourself breathing and you're not disposed to envisioning your future or anything like that, then just you're on vacation. Just be on vacation and watch and be sensitive to what might be whispers in your mind, little things that flit past and you would normally ignore. Try to not ignore them. Try to just catch every little wispy thing that goes on inside of you when you're out there on vacation in nature. And you'll be surprised what kind of inspirations you'll get just by being receptive and open-minded and listening and focusing your attention not only on nature, but also on your inner nature. If you can be open, you'll get clues that were waiting there for you to realize them. Like you had this idea the other day to say something nice to somebody because of some reason, and it just came in and went out of your head. But you should do that. That was a good impulse you had. Write it down so you don't forget it. It's good to have, incidentally, a notebook with you when you go out in nature, because there are going to be things that come up, and you may get a whole rush of ideas, and you could probably only remember 8 of them if you're really good. And then when you first start, you might remember one of them. But if you have a notebook and you could just write down a couple of words about each one, sometimes all you need is a couple of trigger words to bring back the whole thing. So it's always good to have a notebook, or you can use your cell phone if you prefer that.
Yeah. And it's interesting because the more, we do our podcasts, I'm writing or, coaching individuals, there's always topics that come to my mind. And like you say, even for today, couple words, right? I mean, I had about 5 or 10 different things we could have talked about. We've got content for days, right? But there's always something. But those little kind of notes, and it just takes 2 seconds on your phone, because when it comes to you in the moment, trust that it's there and it's alarming you. We started this conversation talking about alarms, right? So trust that that's alarming you for something at this particular point in time for a reason. And I'm kind of laughing now because my partner always says, Natalie, you're having an epiphany every single day. But this is this is I guess where we go to like the personal growth element. And the more you are doing these things, the quicker you will accelerate your own growth. And this is where we talked about last time. It's not so much about doing as a human, it's more about being. And this work rewires your being. And therefore, when you rewire your being, then the opportunities and people that are aligned with you will be magnetized towards you. So, again, you can feel that this is all fluffy work, and it's not fluffy work, it's hard, I know, because doing it every single day, it's not always easy. And these low frequency emotions, being able to look at yourself again and again and again, it's not always comfortable. Like, if anything, it's actually far from comfortable. But if you work on your being rather than your doing, the results and impact you will have, not just on your mood, your happiness, the people around you, but your life overall, will be monumental.
I love the idea of play that came up, the playground scene. Wanted to go back to it just before we close. It's very linked to flow state. The guy who invented the term flow state, Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, when he was head of the psychology department at the University of Chicago, and he was coaching the lacrosse team, he got them to stop thinking about winning and just think about playing. And they got into the zone, flow state, and they won every game. And because they weren't attached to winning, they were just having fun. They were playing like kids.
Mhm.
And that's when you do your best work.
And and I think that's it. It's giving yourself permission to play, permission to have fun, permission to have joy, have happiness. Like, give yourself that permission to do that. The world is so serious. It doesn't need to be this hard and serious, right? It really doesn't. It's like, when did we decide we're all going to put on suits and like be really serious all day and all night? It's, being fun is like, or having fun with no attachment to outcomes is, when you're most magnetic, and people around you can feel it. And not only do you raise yourself, you raise them too, and your whole reality shifts in that order too. So, I mean, really, this has been a fascinating discussion. So, talking about today, these low frequency emotions, or as Bill calls them, negative emotions. We hope, dear listeners, we've given you some insights as to how we do the work. When we talk about do the work, we've given you some insight into what that looks like for us, and how we can transmute these negative emotions, take down the scaffolding, and reveal that beautiful house that is underneath. Bill, any last words before we close out today?
Just two words. And you almost said them, but then you corrected yourself. But I liked, before you corrected yourself, you said, be fun. I like
Yeah,
that.
Yeah, be fun. It's about being, not doing. So you don't need to like have fun. You can just be fun. And then, the fun follows you around, doesn't it? Like life is fun. So, yeah, so thank you so much, Bill. Thank you, listeners, for another wonderful episode. And you heard it here. Bill gave you the permission to be fun. Speak to you next time.
Thanks, Natalie. Thanks, everybody.